life, messy bun, copy, dark circles under your eyes, and basically no sleep for 6 years. Running around exhausted, burned out, stretched way too thin. And then there's a question of co-sleeping, sleep training, crying it out. Will they feel abandoned or need me too much? Not to mention the effects these things can have on our marital relationships. Are we destined as mothers to be exhausted and feel guilty and not to be intimate with our partner again? I believe that our children can feel loved, trusting, and nurtured, and we can find the path and attachment in healthy sleep, but sometimes we just need some help. So that's why I'm so excited to have occupational therapist turned sleep and well-being specialist, Taylor Kulik, here today. Now, Taylor, did I say your last name right?
You did. Yeah, you did. Awesome.
Okay. Taylor's a mom of two who's extremely passionate about empowering parents with evidence-based information, which is what I'm all about. So I'm excited about that, so that they can make informed decisions and validate their instincts. So welcome, Taylor. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I'm really excited to hear everything you have to share. Okay, so my name is Alicia McPeak. For those of you who don't know, I'm a holistic nutrition and wellness coach, and I'm excited to be hosting here today. I have several co-hosts that include Kenna Gonzalez, Alyssa Rose, and I have Danica and Marley, and we're all just excited to welcome you. So if you're joining us on Facebook, please say hello. If you're here live, that way we know you're here and we can be sure to add you to our giveaway. And if you're watching us on replay, just put hashtag replay so we know that you were able to stop by. Now, Taylor, tell us a little bit more about you and how you found your way to helping parents specifically around sleep.
Yeah. So as you said, I'm an occupational therapist. And when I had my first daughter, my first child, who is now 3, the first 6 months or so were just really rough. And in that time, especially with sleep, I had so much anxiety around sleep. That was I don't even remember a lot of that time because it's almost traumatic for me. And so I began to realize the need that we were lacking. There's a lack of support for new moms, but particularly for new moms who are maybe struggling with anxiety or depression, and don't want to sleep train, because that's really what I see happening a lot is that, a mom may go to their doctor or a psychologist or, whoever they're going to for support in that area. And they're being told, well, you just need to sleep train. That's really all they're getting in terms of sleep. They're not being told what is normal for infant sleep. They're not being told that sleep isn't the only thing that impacts mental health, right? It is important, but it's not everything. And so I kind of just began exploring some different avenues in ways that I could help new parents, specifically new moms. And it's kind of just branched out into me finding this specialty in sleep and supporting parents who don't want to sleep train, because that is really where I was finding people really needed support the most. And I myself, didn't want to sleep train, and I began bed sharing with my daughter when she was 6 months old because I had to. And so learning about biologically normal infant sleep and safe bed sharing and all of that, I just really wanted to spread the word about this and educate moms. But then also, there's so often this kind of the two ends of the spectrum when it comes to sleep, right? You need to sleep train, you need to put them on a rigid schedule, you need to let them cry it out. And then on the other side of that, you don't do anything, you just give your baby whatever they want at all times, sleep with them, nothing, right? And so I think that there's a way that we can kind of meet in the middle and respect our child's biological needs, respect them and respond to them, but also, set boundaries and make sure that we're making changes to take care of ourselves too, and respecting our own needs. So that's really where I come in. It's not just a wait it out. Sometimes it is a wait it out, but it's also not, you need to leave your baby in a room and sleep train them. We have to understand where they're coming from, why they're sleeping the way they do or not sleeping the way they do, and then kind of meeting them where they're at. So that's how I got started. So I didn't fully answer your question. So I took a sleep certification through Isla Grace Sleep. And it's just been amazing because it's all about sleep without sleep training. And it helped me to understand infant sleep and support families in a really respectful and responsive way that a lot of families are out there looking for, but they just don't know that option exists.
Okay. And you know what, my experience when I had my first daughter, I had over 30 years ago, 1986. And I knew that biologically, when my child cries, and to this day, if my grandchildren cry, like it affects me, right? So I knew there was no way I was going to stick her in a room and let her cry it out. Like it physically made me hurt to have that going on.
Right.
But the only other option I knew of was to put her in bed with me. Right.
Hmm.
And I never figured out how to transition that, or I never really, then later I had another child, another one, 2 years later, and now you've got two and you're wondering, are we all going to sleep in the same bed? Like, how's this going to work? And I've watched my daughters as they've had their children, and one went the direction that I did. And I see all the same drawbacks that she's had that I had. And then I have another daughter who went a different way. And I see that there's a lot of positives to that. So there's got to be some way to have the best of both worlds. And I'm thinking that's what you help people do, because
Yeah.
there's a lot of drawbacks to having kids in your bed and then not having any other options. Like you have to lay down with them every single time. There's no other way. Like we'll get more into that. Anyway, I just know that there was a lot of drawbacks, and then it became very difficult to transition them out. And there's a lot of stuff that goes on with this, and we could talk more about that. But I wish I had had you, first of all. I would have definitely hired you to help me with this, but just had some more information about options. So I'm excited to hear a little bit more about
Yeah.
how you help people. So let me ask you one question before we move on.
Mhm.
You mentioned that you were really sleep deprived and you had a hard time with your first child. Was there like a moment in the sand where you said, this is it? Like, how did this turn into a mission for you?
Yeah. So, I think like I said, I kind of separate my daughter's first year of life into the first 6 months and the second 6 months, because the first 6 months, I remember, from what very little I do remember, I was sitting with her for hours and hours a day in a dark nursery, trying to get her to sleep by herself in her crib and put her, I was putting her down drowsy but awake, and it wasn't working. And so I was spending hours and hours and hours in there. And then same thing at night, when she began to not sleep in her crib very well, I couldn't get her back in the crib. And I mean, me and my husband and I were both up all night, every 30 minutes. We were exhausted. But I was so, and when I brought her into bed with me to nurse and we fell asleep, she slept great. But I was so terrified to bring her into bed with me, because I've always been told that that is so dangerous and you just should never do that. Right. So then I think there was just one point where, we had just both reached our breaking points and we were exhausted, and my husband had to work. I was working too. And he just said, just bring her into bed with us and
Yeah.
let's keep her in bed. And I said, okay. But I was ashamed. I didn't tell anybody. I thought I was failing as a mom because I couldn't get my baby to sleep in the crib with me, which I now know is such a common feeling and such a common experience for new parents. And we're kind of hush hush about it because we don't want to admit that we're co-sleeping and bed sharing and doing all of that. But then as I was, bringing her into bed out of necessity, I started researching safe bed sharing, and I found the work of Dr. James McKenna. His website is cosleeping.nd.edu, and he's amazing. He's a what is he called? Oh, I can't think of who he is, but he studies cultures, whatever scientist that studies cultures, whatever, an anthropologist. And he studies breast sleeping. So he actually does laboratory studies with breastfeeding infants and mothers, and how they interact with each other, and how to
Oh, wow.
safely bed share. And it's amazing. And so I felt so much validation from his work in my decision and what we were doing. And I realized, okay, this is actually something that's normal. So then I began to dive more into normal infant sleep patterns, and like, okay, so we're being told that infants are supposed to be able to sleep in their crib and sleep through the night and put themselves to sleep, but that's not really matching up to what my experience is. And then I
Right.
started talking to other parents who were also not having that experience. And so that's when I realized there's this big disconnect between what society is telling us, what doctors are telling us, what our family and friends are telling us about how infants should be sleeping versus what they're actually meant to do. And that's kind of when it became my mission to spread this information and get it out there, and like you said, let parents know they do have an option. Like, if you want to bring your baby into bed, do it
Right.
safely. Let's educate them.
And then on the flip side, if that's not working for you, there's got to be options for that as well, right?
Right.
Because, or if there comes a time where you feel like they need help, you need help helping them transition or something like that. Because that was my thing. I had no problem co-sleeping. I loved it. I slept better. I felt rested. I could literally like nurse on both sides without rolling over. I
Yeah.
got really good at co-sleeping. I co-slept with all three of my daughters. but there came a point where they had become so dependent on me
Mhm.
that even as they got older, it was a real transition trouble. Do you know what I'm talking about? And I think that's what I see a lot with sometimes when parents co-parent versus I also see the other side where parents do sleep training and their kids can't sleep anywhere but in their own bed with these own, these
Right.
specific things. So there can be downsides to both. I
Mhm.
feel like there's got to be like this kind of place where you can have some of the best of both worlds. Am I right?
You are right. And of course, I mean, it totally depends on the individual child because, people always ask me, well, what age can I expect my baby won't need me to get to sleep? Or what age can I expect that they'll be out of my bed? And the answer is really that it depends because there's so many factors that go into it. But yes, so, I typically don't do any real work with parents and babies until babies are like 6 months and up because I think that younger than between like 6 and 9 months, even more so like towards 9 and 10 months, but I will do a little bit of work with 6 months because younger than that, it's not always super appropriate to make some parent led changes. But beyond that, it's totally appropriate to set boundaries, right? That's a part of. So I work a lot with parents and their relationship with their baby because a lot of parents go into parenthood if they are wanting to bed share and practice, what we call attachment parenting. There's this kind of misnomer that you have to just give into all of your child's demands and you can't let them cry and all of this. And that's not
Exactly.
exactly true. It's actually really important for the attachment relationship to set loving boundaries with your children. So if you're rocking your baby to sleep, for example, for 30 minutes and they're getting heavy and you're getting exhausted and it's just not working for you anymore, you can absolutely shift that pattern. You're still responding to your baby, you're still supporting them in the way that they need it, but you can shift the pattern of how you're supporting them. So you can lay down next to them and cuddle them or, pat their back or whatever. And it might take longer and they are likely going to cry and be upset about it. But the difference is that you're not leaving them alone in their crib to cry. You're with them, helping support them through their emotions. And it's okay for them to have those emotions. And it's okay for you as the parent or the caregiver to set those boundaries. And so that is how we do the work of shifting patterns and making changes when something isn't right for you.
Okay, that's brilliant. Okay, so I'm gonna ask you some specific questions, and you can just
Okay.
give me some answers. So, I think what I'm hearing you say is under 6 months old for sure, babies can't self-soothe themselves to sleep, right? Okay,
Right. Well, really, even beyond 6 months. So
okay,
children are hardwired to co-regulate, not self-regulate, but co-regulate with
yes,
a calm caregiver, a responsive caregiver.
yes,
And so even really, the research is showing that our brains are actually wired for co-regulation into adulthood, into our 20s.
it's true.
So
I believe
there are
that.
there are some professionals that say that maybe around the ages between 3 and 5, children should be able to start self-regulating, but that doesn't mean that they're going to be efficient at self-regulating or that they're going to be able to do it every time. So really, even older babies and toddlers can't self-regulate. Some may be able to do it earlier than others, but the way that we actually teach them to self-regulate is through co-regulation. We are
Right.
there with them. We show them how to co-regulate, and that's how they learn self-regulation skills. So it's really not appropriate to expect any baby to self-regulate.
I love that term, co-regulate. And I was listening to somebody else, and I can't remember his name right now, but he talks a lot about these kind of subjects in humans, not just parent
Mhm.
relationships. And he says children are meant to connect deeply with
Mhm.
their caregivers, and we're not really giving our children that from the beginning. And then later on, what happens is they connect with their peers instead, which causes a
Right.
whole new set of problems. So I think
Was
if you
it
can,
Dr. Gordon Neufeld?
I don't know.
That
I'll try and
sounds
look it
just
up in a
like his
second.
book. Sounds just
Okay.
like his book, which is amazing. Hold on to your kids. He's phenomenal. His work is actually what my sleep certification is based on. It's
Okay.
amazing. Yeah.
That's great stuff. And see, that's the best part because I really like the evidence behind things, because then I think as parents we can become more confident with our decisions when there's evidence to say what your instinct is telling you is okay, and you're not spoiling your baby. So let's talk about that. Is
Yeah.
it spoiling your baby if you need to rock them to sleep, snuggle them, pick them up if they're crying? The kind of
No.
examples.
Yeah. No, you absolutely cannot spoil a baby. I love the phrase. I don't know who said this, but I love it. You can't spoil baby because they're not food. Only food spoils. And I don't even like the term spoiling, but if we're really talking about what spoiling isn't responding to your child and connecting with your child and showing them love and affection and attention. If anything, if we're thinking about spoiling would be more on that permissive end of parenting,
Right.
where you're never setting those boundaries that we talked about and you're giving into your child's need. And often that comes from a place of fear of emotion, because a parent is afraid of their children's emotions. And so they don't like to hear them or see them cry or upset. And so they're giving them whatever they want. That might be more spoiling, because then our child is not having to work through frustration. They're not ever having a situation that they're not getting their way, which, if you think about it just in life, these moments come up for us all the time, that we're not getting our way. Things aren't going the way we planned. And we might be frustrated. We might be sad. We might be disappointed. It's very healthy for our children to work through that. But our children need support when they're having those emotions. So hugging your upset child, picking up your upset child, rocking them to sleep, that's never going to be spoiling them. If anything, it's helping them to establish a really secure foundation of stability and safety and comfort in their attachment relationship with you, which then only helps them to venture forth and be independent in their own time when it's developmentally appropriate.
So you're responding to their needs and supporting their emotions, which I love. And I got to admit, there was times with my own children and even with my grandchildren where I feel like they're getting upset. I do see a difference, especially when they get around 2. It becomes obvious to me that it's like, oh, I just need to let them feel this now, and I can support them with that versus, and that's where the spoiling line comes in. If you let them dictate to you how your home, your life, and everything is run when it's not appropriate for your family, then that becomes a problem. Or you give in to them, they get their way over everything, and the world revolves around them when that's not appropriate.
Right.
That's where the problem comes in. But responding to their needs and helping support them emotionally, like, that's a brilliant sentence. If you just took that right there, that would pretty much help me, even as a grandparent, navigate that. So thank you for that. That's awesome. Very good.
Yeah.
Okay. So there is options to crying it out. It's okay to co-sleep. Give me some feedback on, okay, I'll ask you some other questions. What about, is it good to have other soothing mechanisms besides just you as mom? Is that a good thing to set up from the beginning? Is there something?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's great. So, I always recommend, so we kind of call these things sleep associations.
I was going to say sleep props. I've heard that.
Yeah. So sleep props is more of a negative thing, right? It sounds negative.
Yeah.
Like if you think about it, we all really do have sleep associations.
Yeah.
We all probably like our pillows a certain way. Maybe
Yep.
we sleep with a sound machine. Maybe we diffuse a certain essential oil at night. So we all have these things that help cue our bodies that it's time for sleep and make us feel relaxed and go to sleep. So it's totally normal that our babies have these things too. And there's nothing wrong with just mom nursing to sleep every night or rocking to sleep every night or whatever, if that's working for her. But I know a lot of families do want to have some options. And sometimes, mom begins to feel resentful if they're just the only one that can get baby to sleep. So yeah, I think it's great. Have a lot of options, practice. I call it kind of layering in other sleep associations to get baby used to those things. And I call it, your toolkit of sleep associations that you can pick and choose what you want to use. And that sometimes can also make it easier for other caregivers to then come in and support baby to sleep too. But ultimately, going off a little bit here, but talking about other caregivers getting baby to sleep, they just ultimately have to practice. And I get that question a lot. How do I get dad to be able to put baby to sleep? Or how do I get, babysitter, nanny, whatever? It just takes practice, because a lot of times all different caregivers that are putting babies to sleep will all have different rhythms and patterns of supporting baby to sleep. And it will actually look different for all of them. And that's totally fine.
That's okay.
Yep.
Okay, that's good to know. Okay, so let's see. Are there, I have another question. Is there magical times? Is there periods of time between naps? Is there a magic hour for bed? Is there anything around that could be helpful?
Are you talking kind of wake windows? Like how long a baby should be awake?
Maybe big wake windows. And here's another problem that I had. I kind of waited until kids seemed tired instead of kind of creating a specific time until they were older, but also I'm heard, and this may be not true, but I remember friends of mine would be like, oh yeah, we put our kid down at 7 and they sleep for 12 hours. And then I was like, well, is 7 o'clock a magic hour? Like, what's the deal? No.
Yeah. Yeah. So no, 7 o'clock isn't the magic hour, although it is a great bedtime for if it works out for a baby. As far as wake windows, yes, there are. So as babies get older, they can progressively stay awake for longer periods of time. There are average wake windows. If you're interested in learning them, you could always just Google, baby wake windows, and you'll get these charts with they might be each a little bit different, but with the kind of average wake window for each age range. But really, it's also important to know that that's just one small piece of the sleep puzzle, because sleep is so holistic. And what I have found is that there are a lot of babies that will fit into that average, but then there are also a lot of babies that won't fit into that average, and they'll either have a much shorter wake window or a much longer wake window, or their wake window will vary quite a bit. So I always recommend following your baby's cues, your baby's tired cues, and seeing if you can put them down a little bit before they get into that really overtired stage where they're, rubbing their eyes and yawning and all of that.
Can they get too tired?
They can get too tired. Yeah. So some babies, a lot of babies will get overtired. And what happens when you get overtired is that your body produces this rush of cortisol, which is our stress hormone.
Mm-hmm.
And so that in and of itself, so a lot of parents come to me and they're like, well, I'm trying to put my baby down. They've been awake for, 3 hours, and maybe that baby is a young baby and should only be awake for like an hour and a half to 2 hours. But they're just so awake and they won't go to sleep. And that's what often happens when baby is overtired, because this cortisol almost produces this second wind, and it makes them seem like baby is not tired. And so they're often harder to get to sleep, but they're also often easier to wake. So that might contribute to more wakefulness at night and shorter naps and things like that. Mm-hmm.
Okay,
so
cool.
But there is no magic bedtime. I don't recommend rigid schedules.
Okay.
Especially babies 6 months and younger. I recommend following wake windows, because naps are probably going to be very inconsistent. And it would be very hard to have a schedule. For babies 6 months and up, if it works for the family, I think that a loose, flexible schedule is great, but still, I would still follow wake windows. And depending on, how naps go that day, you may be putting baby to bed within 20 or 30 minutes before or after your kind of standard bedtime. So, and some families just don't like schedules and it doesn't work well for them. And that's fine too. It really depends on the family unit.
Okay, true. Okay. So we do have a question on Facebook.
Okay.
And if you guys are on Facebook, please definitely say hello, because we want to put you enter you in the drawing. Kenna just joined us. Thanks, Kenna. I'm glad you're here. Oh, she's got something to say too. But Johan said, I have a question about later years from infancy. My daughter is 3 and co-sleeps with me. Do they naturally pick the time they want to sleep independently? Because it seems like she will always want me to put her to sleep, and she checks that I'm in the bed throughout the night often, and would usually wake up if I'm not within touching distance. Good question.
Yeah. So again, it really depends on the child. So some children will, when they feel secure and ready to go into their own bed, they will voice that. They will, let you know that. But for some children, it does take a little bit longer. And if it's not happening when you maybe want it to, or you need it to, depending on your situation, you may need to do a little bit of parent-led changes. And so I have a whole course around this toddler sleep, and it gets very complex, because we're talking about parenting and relationship and emotion and setting boundaries, like we just talked about. And so there are ways to do this. Like, for example, my daughter, I told you is 3, we were bed sharing and nursing to sleep up until she was 2. And then we decided that we wanted to start trying to conceive. And I did not want to get pregnant and have her still sleeping in my bed. Like I wanted to know that she could go into her own room once the baby was here. And so we transitioned her to her own room. My husband took over doing nighttime parenting and bed sharing with her for quite a while to get her used to her space. And it's worked out really nice for us. So she sleeps, basically through the night in there most of the time. And sometimes my husband bed shares with her just because we have a baby who is very wakeful. So he gets more sleep, but he doesn't have to bed share with her most of the time. So there are lots of ways that you can make that transition if you feel. It really depends on, if your child is ready, but then that's kind of easy. But if your child isn't ready, but you're ready, it's okay for you to start making that transition too.
Okay. So you have a whole course around that.
I do. Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. So we're almost done with time. So let's kind of wrap this up with that. Like, what do you offer? What are your different courses or things like that?
Yeah. So I have 3 courses. I actually have one postpartum course, which is how I got started. It's on postpartum recovery. And then I have 2 sleep courses. So I have an infant foundation sleep course that is great for ages 0 to 18 months. And then I have a toddler foundations sleep course, which is great for 12 months plus, but it's really ideal for 18 months plus. And I also offer low cost webinars. I offer webinars that are $15. I do 3 a month on just pretty specific topics like sleep environment or transitioning from the bed to the crib or things like that. And then I also offer one-to-one support. So I book hourly calls if people just want to see me face to face and answer their really specific questions and get information on their specific scenario and challenge.
Which sounds like it could be really beneficial. Kenna said she did one of your webinars and it was wonderful. What was it about, Kenna? Which one did you do? She'll tell us in a second. Awesome. Okay, let me see if there's any more on Facebook. Now, we have, okay, and we have, so how would somebody find out about your courses and how much they cost and things like that? Go to your website?
Yep, so
Is that the best thing to do?
Yeah, my main website is taylorkulik.com, and you can find the courses there. But if you're specifically looking at just the courses, you can also go to courses.taylorkulik.com.
Oh, okay.
And then you can also find all of that information on my Instagram as well, which is @taylorkulik. I do have a discount code for you guys if anybody's interested.
Awesome.
For
Yes.
my 3, it will work for the 3 courses that I just described, not the webinars. So I have 25% off for you guys with the code attachment.
Nice.
All caps, attachment.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. Did you also, were you going to give a little something away too?
I can.
You don't have to. I'm sorry. I didn't remember if you were or not. A
We
discount
didn't talk
code is
about it, but
fantastic.
I'm happy to if you.
No, we're good.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh, she did the infant one from 0 to 6 months. Okay. So I'd love to hear how it helped you. If you want to share with us. So I found you through Kenna. She found you through Instagram, I believe. So that's how we got you here today. So once again, I just want to say we are really grateful that you're here. We are grateful for this discount code and the webinars, and just the facts that you shared today are absolutely amazing and so helpful. I just really want to empower parents not to feel guilty, to trust their own instincts. But I do think there is a point, a fine line. We also don't want and it's somewhere around 2 or 3. I feel like they start knowing where they start learning that they can get you to do things. And there's that point where you do need to be empowered to create healthy boundaries that work for you, your child, your family. And it's okay to do that as well. See, because I had the whole like kind of indulgent side of attachment parenting, which I loved everything about attachment parenting, but it was not as easy for me to distinguish those healthy boundaries. So I really appreciate that part. And I'll go back to responding to needs and supporting the emotions they're having is the most perfect thing that I could take away from this. So that's awesome. All right, so everybody knows you can find Taylor if you're on the event page. Definitely both her website. I didn't put her Instagram there, but we can go back and put her Instagram there. But let me see what Kenna said real quick. It was enlightening on general sleep windows and getting a rhythm versus a schedule. Very nice. I've had a much easier time with my second child because I had different expectations than the very first time around. Okay, good. This is the child of mine that followed my pattern of attachment parenting, but definitely co-sleeping. So I'm glad it's been helpful for her because there's only so much I can help with because my experience is limited. So So anyway, go to taylorkulik.com, TAYLORKULIK. Check her out. She's awesome, amazing. And I think if you need help in these areas, get the help. Like sign up on a course, do a webinar, be on her Instagram and or her Facebook, learn from her. She's got a lot of great empowering information that is evidence-based and it's awesome. So we do these weekly, usually Thursdays at 1 p.m. Central Time. Our next Zoom webinar will be October 15th. We're featuring Jen Burton, who's a local to the Woodlands, Conroe, Willis area in Texas, business owner and owns the Raw Creation Juice Bar. Now, if you'd like to see past Mommy Me conversations, please go to our YouTube channel, which is Alicia McPeak Presents. Make sure you subscribe and hit the little bell notification button so you don't miss any of these great conversations. Once again, thank you so much, Taylor, and thank you all for joining us today. Have a healthy, well, and wise week. Thanks, Taylor, so much.